Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Berglund, Chair of the Finance Committee, and I just wanted to thank you all for coming out this evening. A couple of housekeeping items. Just silence your cell phones, if you would, please, just to kind of keep down the interruptions on that front. We're kind of, so let me take the time first to introduce the members of the committee to Pete Murphy, many years of service. Ray Bricalt, many, many years of service. Mary Foley, still many years of service. And Lena Archibald, who's just coming in and going to join us up here in the front. A rookie, but by the same token has brought in a great deal of knowledge and expertise to the committee. Just some, we're a volunteer committee, and we try to work together as best we can within the confines of regulations and laws and open meeting requirements and so forth, and try to be respectful of our members' time. Keep in mind, they're your neighbors, we're all your neighbors, we're taxpayers. These folks take a great deal of time away from their families, from their jobs, to do the work that we're given to do. That said, we do enjoy it, and it's really a great, great community to be part of. Let me just... The presentation, we're going to go through a bunch of slides. They are prepared by all us, and they were we're missing two members of the committee too, and two important members. I'm sorry. As you can tell, this wasn't really well rehearsed, but Jason Brockway, another valuable member of putting together the presentation and providing some data, and Greg Zakarian, a new member, just came on a few months ago. He had been a member once before. As this presentation came together, thanks to all these folks, we also benefited from a lot of the data provided by the West Boylston Town Accountant, West Boylston Public Schools, who are, some of those folks are here tonight, the West Boylston Town Administrator, so right here in the front row. Some archived town meeting reports, because you'll see that this is really a historical presentation, kind of showing you what we've gone through to get to where we are, and the Massachusetts Department of Local Services website. Very valuable, and thanks to Jen for letting us see that. 7 members, combined 50 years of combined service on the Finance Committee, or greater than 50 years. So, I mean, I think we're probably closer to 75. I don't know. It's well up there. We've all been in town for, I think, if you aggregate all of our residencies, it's over a century, I'm sure. We are not an elected board. We're a board that's appointed by the Select Board. And at various terms, we all are expiring at various terms. I believe we still have 2 or 3 vacancies. I'm not sure. 7. I think it was committee of 10. But so if you're interested, don't be bashful. Some of the work that we do, in addition to, this is kind of new for us, but it's a good arena. We review operating budgets and capital requests with each department. Including the schools, even though they do their own budgeting, but they are kind enough to share some of their information with us and go through it so we can kind of get a global look at the town. Organize the inventory of town capital assets and needs. That's for the entire town. And then each year or each semi-annual town meeting, we look at the warrant and review the articles and opine on those articles set forth that have a financial impact to the town as we see it. So we'll start with this slide that we had, some of you who were probably at town meeting last May of 2023, we made a presentation, Finance Committee made a presentation, and just kind of cautioned that the years of more prosperous revenues and controlled expenses were in jeopardy. We had been tested in the last couple of years, and going forward, we may have a little bit of a challenge from a budget standpoint. So in 2025, which is this coming fiscal year, going through all the numbers with schools, with the town, we determined that there's really about a $1.3 million structural deficit. Now, what do we mean by a structural deficit in the town? So that's basically a deficit that is not being funded by recurring revenues. We are looking to one-time sources to address the needs year in and year out of the town, to the tune of about, in 2025, it's going to be about $1.3 million. So for tonight, we're going to approach this in kind of a chapter fashion. I'm going to ask that if you have questions, step to the microphone, because this is being recorded. I think I said that once, but I'll say it again. And the folks told me to make sure that people talking to the microphone, do not let them even ask a question if they're not talking into the microphone. So for our standpoint, we're going to talk a little bit about the tax background in the town, how we come up with the levy, and so on and so forth, operating budget, revenue and expenses, explain key reasons for the gap this year, and it's actually not only been this year, it's been over the last couple. Revenue growth we're going to address, and reduction in state funding and pandemic-related assistance. And then preview some options moving forward. 2.5 override, a reduction in services, and what will be required to achieve those. So that said, I'm going to turn it over to Pete Murphy.
Thank you. So we're going to look at the property tax, the revenue side of the situation. And most of that revenue comes from property tax. And so this is a property tax table that we prepared in order to compare different surrounding towns. And West Boylston is highlighted here in yellow. And we've organized this based on this column, which is the single family tax bill. So if we look at what we pay for the average single family house in these various towns, we pay a little less than in Leicester, or excuse me, a little more than in Leicester, Clinton, and Rutland, but we pay a bit less than Holden, Sterling, and as we get into other towns like Shrewsbury, Berlin, and Northborough, we pay quite a bit less in property single-family tax bill for a single-family house. Now that tax bill is based on the average single-family house value, and that's quite different for different towns. Here in West Boylston, it's at $467,000 is what we consider the assessed value, the taxable value for a single-family house. And you can see in some of the surrounding towns, the numbers get quite a bit higher than we see in West Boylston. So we have about 2,000 family parcels. This is a little bit of a problem for us in that because the state owns about half the town, we don't have a lot of opportunity for new building and new construction that would add to our taxable revenues. So we're kind of limited in that we tend to be somewhat built out in terms of having new single-family housing. And we'll show some numbers on that later. Okay. Did you do that, or am I? You want me to move on? in any event, so most of the revenue that we generate comes from those single-family houses, those 2,000 parcels, the assessed valuation for those, and that's based on what we call the tax levy limit. And so based on law, there's only so much tax money that we can collect year in and year out. And that is limited then to what was in the base the previous year, and then to an increase of 2.5% over that base, and then any new growth that may occur. So if the new properties come on and are taxed, then they're added into that tax base. We've also shown override here because that's the topic tonight. Override does not incur very often, but that is the topic.
I just want to also.
You need the microphone.
I think it's also important to note that it's not just. Don't go away. You keep going. I think it's also important to note it's not just households that are paying this tax. I mean, the levy is made up of households. It's also commercial buildings. It's personal property of businesses that are operating within our town. And that's something, as you know, that we have committees here that are encouraging development of business in town. Unfortunately, it just hasn't been as quick as we would like it to be, but it has been somewhat steady. And that all contributes to they all contribute to the tax levy, and we can't overlook that because that's valuable. We have a single tax rate, as Pete, on the last slide, you saw the tax rate. Some towns choose to do a bifurcated tax rate, whereby commercial properties pay a higher rate. We've actually benefited by that at times because we've had times that have chosen West Boylston as a place to do business because we have a single tax rate and we also have very favorable utility rates. So thanks. Sorry, Pete.
So the reason we're focusing obviously on single-family houses and parcels is because that's why you're all here. I'm sure most of you are paying taxes on that basis, but we do have commercial income as well that's included in that. But that's all limited, again, to this 2.5 increase. That's as much as we can put up the base from the previous year and then add in any new growth. And we should say that we have had some significant new growth, and that includes single-family houses as well as some commercial additions, and that's helped to get us to where we are today. But we're slowly running out of that as the ability to keep us paying our bills and meeting our budget needs. And so that's why we're here. We've got this override is the topic. So this more or less summarizes what I was saying. We have the levy limit from the previous year. We then look at the town operating budget, and we raise that levy limit by the 2.5. We add any of the new growth, we calculate our revenue. And once we know our revenue, then we have to compare that to our operating budget, and the operating budget and revenue should balance. Unfortunately, this year that's not the case. We're about $1.3 million, we think, in deficit versus what we can raise for our revenue and what we need for the budget. And so we're a little bit out of balance. I didn't do this slide, but I guess it's trying to make that point, right? So we have taxation, which is what we've been talking about. State funding is the other big source. We're going to show you some numbers on that. And there's some other kinds of one-time revenue and funds that come in. The ARPA money that came to the town from the federal government for the COVID problems was some money that also helped us out to get us another couple of years before we had to face this problem. So on the expense side, programs and services, we have different expense mandates, of course, insurance and retirement, and inflation is the issue. Chris looks like he wants to.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I mean, so we have some symbols here. Kalina, you put this slide together, which is kind of really indicative of where we are on the revenue side. Our funding sources, taxation's been fairly level, obviously, 2.5%, that's all we can do. State funding has been decreasing, going down as a source of funds for our, that we can put towards our budget, both on the school side and on the municipal side. And one-time funds, as Pete mentioned. And this is, you know, some sunsetting. So we have ARPA funds that you've heard that. Those were all from the COVID time. And I think on the school side, you had ESSER funds, which were similar to help support the budget during those periods. They're gone now. That's no more. And others, I mean, when we look at some of the other things that we've benefited from over years, grants and so forth, they're still there, and we're still seeking them out, but they're much, much more competitive because other communities are going through the same thing. And the pot that is being offered for these grants is not growing. So, give you an example. I mean, on the housing side, we applied for a grant for a housing production plan, and was not accepted. And we were like, well, you know, what happened? And we contacted the Department of Housing Community Development, and they got back to us and said, well, here's the deal. I mean, you guys were very close. You were very close. But, you know, keep in mind, there was a $4.5 million pool, $4.5 million pool, and there was over $11 million in applications. So that's, I mean, we're just facing that all over. And then over here, I mean, we can talk about, you know, programs and services have been steady. We have not increased program services greatly. Mandates are up. So mandates are from the federal government, from the state government. That's, you know, early voting. You guys didn't choose that. We didn't say that we have to do early voting, but that's, the state says you have to do that. So we have to staff that to make it available. We have to buy the equipment to make that available. So that's up, along with others. Insurance, retirement, Pete will get to, and inflation.
Yeah, we're going to do some details. We'll do some details here then about the revenue sources, and then we'll talk about the expenses here in a minute. So let's. I think we have some details coming up. Okay, so again, on a percentage basis, looking at revenues, taxation represents 3/4 of the revenue that we have. The state aid is another 13%. Local receipts, so local receipts are things that get paid for permits and other kinds of things. Also, I think excise tax, those kinds of things are local receipts. And then a small portion of other, and I think I'll show what that is in a second. Let's go to the next slide. So here we go. Oh.
No, because I think it's important. I want to get into some of these things a little bit deeper because, for instance, local receipts, Pete talked about a little bit, but let's get specific as to, you know, what's included in that number. You'll see the exact number next time. Pilot payments. So that's payments in lieu of taxes. The state does on all that land they don't let us develop that's owned by the DCR that we were allowed to hike on and stuff like that, but they don't, they do pay us a payment. Not on the jail though, right? I don't believe the jail is included in that. That's not. But DCR land is. And looking back so for 2025, the estimate for pilot payments to the town is $683,000. All right. That's a whole $63,000 more than what was paid to the town in pilot payments in 2015, 11 years ago. All right. If we just had the benefit of a 2.5% increase on those pilot payments year after year after year, we would have, in 2025, another $150,000 that could go towards our revenue side, not including all the incremental increases throughout the years. So, I mean, that's just an example of where the state cuts have, I mean, you know, and they're not looking at it as a cut. It's just, it's not keeping pace. It's not keeping pace.
Yes, I think we have some of the detail for that in the next slide, I believe. Right. And so, yeah, if we look at 2025, this is the forecast for 2025. We're looking at from the prior tax levy basis, right? That's without the 2.5% increase. We have $20 million. The 2.5% increase is another $518,000. We're estimating that we'll get about another $150,000 from new growth. That's property that wasn't taxed the previous year. These Chapter 70 funds, these are funds that come from the state to the school, about $3 million. As Chris was saying, these we'll see a little bit later. This hasn't really kept up with inflation. Hasn't even done the 2.5%. School choice. This is for students that attend West Boylston schools from out of the district. And we add in free cash, $300,000. We kind of limit that. That shouldn't be a large part of our revenue. Free cash is money that was budgeted but wasn't spent the previous year. And so we do end up with some free cash that we can usually allocate towards capital expenditures. We're talking about operating expenditures here, right? This is the everyday operating expenses versus capital expenses for like a truck or something like that. And then also snow and ice, because we tend to overrun in that budget, is where we use free cash. Ambulance receipts. The ambulance has been pretty much self-funded. General government, now this is the municipal aid you're talking about, Chris. Included in here is the pilot payments and some of the other payments. You want to?
I just want to jump in a little bit on a couple of things. Free cash. So free cash is not something that should be part of an operating budget, or use of free cash. That's not sustainable. So that contributes to that. We talked about a $1.3 million structural deficit. That's 300,000 of it right there. So therein lies that challenge. We have relied on that for a number of years. And what has that done to us? Well, as Pete alluded to, $300,000 a year, well, it's 1% of what the operating budget is each year. That's what and you'll see a slide that will talk to that policy that was adopted by the selectmen years ago. But what that relates to is 1% over a number of years is real money. And what free cash is supposed to be used for are upkeep of buildings, capital, keeping your fleet straight, looking at enhancing asset growth from the standpoint of buildings and so forth. That's where those monies should be targeted to. Rainy day fund. I mean, you hear that all the time. That's really what it comes down to. There are times during the budget year when, oh my goodness, we had a catastrophe in one of the departments, where you might have had people out sick, you may have had issues with disability, whatever it might be, where you have to pay additional overtime, and these are kind of emergency funds that you would look to. That's what kind of the free cash. And I know Jim Ryan, I don't see him here tonight, a former select board member, Ray remembers him well. He would always come to me and say, "It's not free cash. It's unexpended revenues that have been returned to the town's coffers." And he's absolutely right. That's cash that we have paid in as taxpayers, that businesses have paid in as taxpayers. There's nothing free about it. But I don't know, Ray, do you want to jump in? No, you're good. You're good? All right.
Okay, so local receipts here, as you can see. That does include the pilot, the SWAT fees, and this is municipal aid. And so this totals up to near our $30 million revenue that we need for the budget in the coming year. So I think we have the next slide. Let's see if that doesn't show. So what this shows then is we just looked at 2025, right? $30 million. We're going to compare that to 2015 to 2020. and look at that percent change over this 10-year period, okay? And so what we're seeing is the tax levy has increased about 45% over 10 years. The 2.5 growth increased exactly 45%, which is exactly what you would expect mathematically. New growth, however, has been pretty much capped. And we're actually forecasting slightly lower new growth in the coming year than we've had in some of the previous years. The Chapter 70, which is state aid, is only up 10% over 10 years. And that's what Chris is talking about, the 2.5, if we had 2.5% here, we'd have a number closer to the 45.
Right. Yeah, and actually, Pete, this is an 11-year basis.
Yes, sorry.
So it's not even 1% a year in Chapter 70 that we've seen on average. But, I mean, that's really all. I just wanted to add that piece because I think.
So Chapter 70's been kind of slow from the state. We could use more funding there, but we're not likely to get it. School choice has been an area where the schools have benefited and have used school choice to help continue to fund their budget and to try to avoid where we are today to get looking for this override. We talked about free cash already. Ambulance receipts, the ambulance receipts have up quite a bit. That's because they've put up the cost of the ambulance, but it's pretty much self-funding. And again, general government, now again, this is the state, we're only up 20%. Chapter 70 is up 10, the state, general government's up only 20, and that really doesn't compare to where we think we should be over this period relative to these two state receipts. Local receipts also have been growing very slowly. You need to buy new cars. Okay? You want to add something?
Okay, yeah, no, we'll take it. Ray, you want to take this slide?
This is the last one, Chris.
Oh, you're going to take it? All right.
And then we can do then we can do the expense side. All right. So here are these numbers. From 2015, the budget was $21 million. We look at 2025, excuse me, the budget now is $30 million. That's an average growth of 3.22% per year over the 11-year period. Over here, we're just kind of comparing that with what's happened with inflation. This is the CPI, and we're looking at 3.36% per year over that same period. So we've been increasing our budget at a slightly slower rate than the overall inflation, but of course you all know about this. This just happened the last couple of years, and we've that's hit our budgeting pretty hard. Okay.
Thanks, Pete.
Sit down.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks. Thanks. Any questions so far? Step to the microphone, please.
Winthrop Handy, 53 Central Street, 51-year resident, and 27-year member, West Boylston Light Board. The question I have, Chris, is on your first equation, shouldn't we have the DCR included in that equation and know the future property they want to buy in West Boylston to protect their watershed? They've got $190 million in their budget. So what we have here is, it seems almost unsustainable, keeping that in mind. We need to know our representative, our senator, has to be able to be on our side. And the fact that we're districted now in Worcester's 14th Worcester district, we have very little representation. We saw that in this building and at the police new building. So just to address your first economic equation.
Well, I don't have the answer. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we do need that representation. Hopefully events like this will heighten the awareness with, Beacon Hill we're in a very difficult community from that standpoint as far as visibility on, I think they do the best that they can. I'd like to believe that. But again, as far as addressing those numbers on the revenue side, yeah, I mean, you can see it's just not keeping pace with which is ordinary inflation, or the 2.5% that you and I have to keep pace with as far as property owners.
With the light department, the Oakdale Hydro, it's power generated by letting water out of Quabbin. It turns a turbine in Oakdale, and it was at one point, not too long ago, it was in our energy pie, it represented 25%. And we went to the office of Harriet Chandler and said, we need this power for West Boylston. We're getting socked, and we've got sewer rates for people that are going to go up. And so we pretty much begged for some assistance. They chose to give that power to National Grid and not West Boylston. So we're seeing that we're like second-class citizens in Massachusetts, and we're facing its taxation without any representation.
No, you're not. I can't disagree with you. I mean, I think it's a huge challenge that we have.
It's got to change, though. You have to go and you got to fight for it.
Yep, you're right.
So
Thanks, good comments. Ray, do you want to take some on expenses? Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. One thing I will note with regard to DCR is I think pretty much every select board and every town administrator we've had for the past 20 years has approached them and has approached our representation to try to get some kind of adjustment to our pilot funds, which really are seriously undervalued based on the town. So it's a really good point, but it is purely legislative in nature. So reach out to your representatives and let them know you'd like a little more attention. Okay, so now we're transitioning to the expense side, but before I get started, just wanted to make a note of credit to our chair, Chris Berglund. He's put a huge amount of time and energy into this presentation and meeting with all the various department heads, and we thank him for all that effort. Okay, so now looking at the expense side. I think everyone knows that nominally the schools occupy about half of our budget, and there's not a lot of flexibility there as to the nature of what it is we provide to the students of town. But as you look at these larger pools of money, you see the second largest one is this other, which is benefits, insurance, ESCO, and debt. When we look at the flexibility of the budget, these numbers are virtually fixed. We have no ability to really adjust them in any real way. I think you probably know from your own experiences. I know from my business, I think the average insurance increases each year have been in the 6 to 7% range. I'm sure you're all seeing that with your own experiences. We're getting assessments that we can't really control for retirements. They're entitled to that money for their income. Again, not something we can really control. So education's largely what it needs to be. Other benefits, which the second largest category have no real control over. And you take a look at the rest of these budgets, public safety is next in line, and we've been doing everything we can. I think in some of the other slides we'll talk about difficulties we've had with the fire department. The call format for staffing the fire department just wasn't working. We couldn't get the volunteers. So we've had to basically invest in some more resources for that. And the rest of these categories, we can make some efforts to cut corners, but when we cut corners, we're going to be cutting services. So it's a question of what you're looking for quality of life in town and what kind of services you expect to get. Okay, so taking a look at a comparison of the budgets, moving from 2015 to 2025, it's just another slice of the pie. But one notable here, if you look at the total education slides here, this might seem like it doesn't match some of the other data that we've looked at before. So you see total education's gone from 49% of the budget in 2015 to 47% of the budget in 2025. But in the other slides, you'll see that it's actually gone up 30%. So what's the difference? The difference here is this is the amount the town is funding. The schools have had to dig into their coffers of various types of reserves to balance the budget. Now, what we'll see as we go through this is that can only go so far, and we've reached that limit. So just really wanted to make a note of this because it would seem like the school budget is decreasing, but that's not the case. Yeah. Again, we take a look at the benefit side, which was the second largest funding category. It's gone from 20 to 23%. We have only expectations that will increase with time. And some of the numbers that we'll take a look at later are based on projections on how we see each of these expense categories growing over time. And again, the other categories aren't going to have a huge sway in the total budget.
Debt service is an important one, too. Looking at debt service, too, you can see that that's over on the gray slice of the pie. Thanks, Clena. And that was, again, that's literally half of the budget compared to what it was in 2015. So in 2025, even with the addition of a senior center debt, even with the addition of, we're still working through the police station, the debt service has become literally 50% of what the component of the budget as it was back in 2015. We also benefited from much lower interest rates when we did those projects, so that helped.
Yeah, and one conclusion you could take away from this is that we're a bit undercapitalized, and when we take a look at some of what may come, I think that'll be pretty clear. So again, we're looking at the same data, just chopped up in different ways. You can see the relative growth here. So our budget this year is just over 30 million. Back in 2015, it was right around 20. So we're talking about a 45% increase in the budget over that 10-year period. You'll see that the gray boxes at the top here, total employee benefits, risk management, and ESCO, is growing disproportionately to the balance of the budget. And I don't know, there's a lot more to say with regard to this slide.
There is a little bit. I just want to say, one of my takeaways from this, and I'll give it back to you in a sec, Roy, but I just want to, talking about those employee benefits risk management line, that's grown $8.2 million since 2015, all right? The total budget, I'm sorry, the budget's grown $8.2 million, I'm sorry. The budget's grown $8.2 million since 2015, all right? The employee benefits risk management piece has grown $2.7 million. So that's over 30% of the budget growth has been just in that one category. And as Ray pointed out, that's something we don't have any control over. I mean, that's basically insurances, it's retirement benefits. We're part of a county retirement system. We don't have our own system. So I guess the benefit of that is I think it's fully funded, so that's the good news. I think the challenge is we have to make sure that we have to pay what they tell us to pay. That's really all I had to add to that. Thanks.
Actually, also a clarification. We've collectively said we don't have any control over this, but that's a little bit unfair. Our insurance advisory board has done a great job looking at consolidating insurance plans. The things that we do have control over how some of these services are contracted, we've done everything that we can find to do. So we're not floundering, but there's only so far you can go by consolidating and limiting options, and union negotiations in particular get to be a little touchy from the standpoint of benefits management. Okay, so again, looking at 10-year growth rate, just to provide perspective, what should stand out at the bottom here is the total employee benefit risk management portion has gone up 82%. It's incredible how much that is. We don't show the budget figures next to this. You would look at intergovernmental as the next one, 77%, but it's thousands of dollars. It has no material impact. So debt service, as Chris mentioned, went down, which you would say, okay, that's a good thing, but it's really a harbinger for something not yet dealt with. Public Works has gone up 46%. Again, that's a larger line item, but that's a very capital-intensive, labor-intensive department. And education, again, this is 31%, but bear in mind, this is exclusive of the funding that they have added. So the figure is actually bigger than that. So take a look on the right just to provide some perspective. Prop 2.5 would have allowed 28% increase over this period of time. Inflation, based on the sources we pulled, looked like about 34%. Our budget has increased 44%. And again, this is small town issues and being able to leverage what we can within our budget. There's only so many things we can really do. Okay, Chris, I think you're going to take it from here.
You guys want to add anything to the prior slides?
Any questions?
And we're good for questions for right now? We're going to shift gears a little bit. Just talk a little bit, and again, thanks to the schools for providing us with some information. This is basically just a representation of enrollment history at the West Boylston schools. You can see that the trend has been fairly steady as far as enrollment across the last 10 years. Some peaks, some dips, but it's relatively steady. I mean, it's back up to where, probably close to the highest it's been, which is good news. I think you can see a little bit of an increase in what we call, students, needing some assistance. Get to a little bit more on that as we go, but and the other piece is the out-of-district placements. So as you know, that there's school choice. There's also placements where certain students have to go to different districts and so forth, and that's basically that tan line that's in there. It's been fairly steady, but not something that we have any control over either. And I think that's an important component. This is spending, and again, just a low, 50,000 foot of the staffing piece at the schools. And basically, since again 2015, you can see that that's been very flat. They've not added anything, which is, I guess that's when you're budgeting, you say that, well, that's great, but as I alluded to earlier, with different mandates and everything that come down from the state and so forth for education and federal governments, are we making sure that we're keeping pace with everything that we need to do with the programs and so forth? But so there's not a lot of, all I'm saying is there's really nothing there to cut. All right. Now, this is an interesting slide. Now, I hope you can all see it because it's kind of difficult to read. But again, these will all be up on the. The reason I put this up here is I think this is an interesting representation. If you look, you'll see that, number one, the budget grew from 13.5 to 16.6, so like $3.1 million from. This is the actual school budget. This is not the part that's funded just by the town. This is their full budget. So that's an increase of about $3.1 million. The piece of this that's interesting is you see that the special ed number went from $4 million to $6.4 million. That's 2.4 million of 3.1 going to special needs. So that's basically 70% of the increase is going to what we saw on the prior slide, about 20% of the students. So I'm just saying, so what's happening, so in my mind, where's the rest? I mean, how do we balance it? Schools have done a great job, but they're basically, running out of track, or so to speak, or running out of road. We look here, Pete had mentioned in the earlier slides about school choice and circuit breaker funding. This is very volatile. It's formula driven. I couldn't even go touch what Christy does on a day-to-day basis to try to get these numbers close, because the state requires it. So, up to this amount, you get this, over this, it's this, and then you're capped at that, whatever it might be. So it's all over the place. The prudent budgeting says, well, we'll get 2025's money next year. We won't get it. So for services we provide to students that qualify for those categories, we don't get that this year. We don't send them a bill once a month. The end of next year, they say, okay, what did you do? We'll put it in our algorithm and figure it out, and you'll get that next year. So the prudent budgeter says, okay, we got 258,000. Let's say, I mean, we don't have the revenue here, but this number should be what was actually expended in the prior year. So we should be able to move and do that. What's happening, as you can see, there is no way we're going to see that kind of reimbursement in 2025. That's how the schools are looking to balance. They're basically taking money that would normally accrue in the current year for next year and saying, we have no choice, we have to use it this year. So from a prudent budgeting standard, I mean, I just don't think, again, it's not no choice, but it's not what you would ideally look for. That makes sense? Okay, yeah, thanks for, what was that?
You want to mention the town appropriation line?
Oh, town appropriation, yep, go back. Can you go back one? Did I have it? Thank you. Thanks, Kalina. Should just jump in. All right. This is the other one that's very important. Back in fiscal year 20, 91.5% of the school's budget came from the town. So, and in 2025, it's 85%. So that's down 6%. So that's a concern too, because what's happening is that gap is getting wider from what the town is providing versus what the schools need. So, yeah. Yep, please do.
Hi, Jim Pedoni, School Committee Chair. I just want to kind of piggyback off of a comment Chris made about the out-of-district placement and things that we can't control, and also some comments that Ray made about insurance. I would like to say that the schools have added programs where possible to keep students in district, where if we haven't done these, added these additional services for certain students, that out-of-district number would be even higher. So there are a lot of aspects we cannot control, but where we can control them, we've put in significant effort to keep those costs down.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And and again, not to, applaud, I mean, but we do have to, be respectful for what the school's done. I mean, because, again, going back to that, showing the staffing numbers, you've added some stuff and have not necessarily added to staff, reshuffled the staff, and that's to the superintendent and the business offices and the school committees doing, but I think that's important. This is basically, again, a graphical representation of the school budget versus the town appropriation. So the blue line is the school's budget since 2020. The tan line is the town's appropriation. You can see that there's just kind of a widening gap. It was much closer back here, and gets a little bit wider as we're getting out to current days, and that's what we can do. The school budget growth is this gray line. So you can see there was some spikes in there, and I think that probably had to do with COVID and so forth, or some others. But they managed that with, again, some of that growth was handled through internal funds. And then the town appropriation growth, you can see, has had increases, was actually more than, was higher this year, which was good than prior, but you can just see that there's still a significant widening gap. Who's got this one? Is it man? We can all jump in, but I'll let Ray grab it.
Okay, thank you, Chris. One thing I would also note for the schools, and we have a lot of clever people working in town, they did restructure their transportation and save the town quite a bit of money by buying vans and staffing them directly. So again, we don't have a lot of control over it, but we take whatever control we can. Okay, so structural deficit. We've heard about it. On the town side, I think Chris talked about normal and customary budgeting procedures. You shouldn't use non-recurring revenues to fund recurring expenses. So we've been doing it. We really shouldn't be doing it, and it's really affected our ability to fund capital projects and other things in town. So we've lived with it, but we need to fix it. From the school's perspective, and you've seen the numbers. Chris went through them in detail. It's flat state funding, modest school choice funding. Again, we don't have any control over those formulas. Effectively, no inflationary increases. Thus, effectively, we have about a 3.5% decrease. And we haven't had an override since 1992. That's a long period of time. We have done all sorts of mental and fiscal gymnastics to not have to do that, but that's not going to continue. So what's driving this gap? State aid, we've talked about, it's not keeping pace. Prop 2.5, I mean, we've all seen what the inflation figures look like in the last few years. 2.5% just doesn't cover it. I think last year, depending on where you go, they'll say it was 6%, 7%, something like that. So 2.5 it's a good control mechanism, but it's not really responsive to what's going on. So new growth, again, half the town is protected land. I heard something to the effect that we only had one new house scheduled for this year. It's hard to fund much new growth with one house. One-time funds has been used to really patch things. The ARPA program went everywhere. We bought capital, we patched some of the operating budget, but ARPA is gone. So that's not going to be able to help us going forward. Free cash, in order to make the budget balance this year, our town administrator had to be much more aggressive in estimating some of these budgets. So normally they're a little more conservative, and when we don't spend all that money, it rolls forward into free cash, and that's available for other things. But to make the budget balance, had to take a different approach this year. School funding, again, we've talked about it. School choice funds, they're stretched that about as far as they're going to go. Circuit breaker funds, same thing. ESSER, which is basically the school equivalent of the ARPA funds, which is essentially the money we got for taking care of COVID expenses. So those mechanisms aren't going to be there going forward. As far as increased expenses, I talked briefly about the fire department. You had no choice. We had to go through a restructuring process. We had to hire personnel for, ultimately the safety of citizens of town. Insurance, again, healthcare is out of control. We've done what we can. The gone through and consolidated plans, and that's been a large part of some of the negotiations with the unions to really try to work with the town so that we can minimize some of those increases. Retirement expense, again, we're allocated some portion of the expenses for retirees from town. State formula, it's not something.
Yeah, it's historically been, it's 10% a year, so that's substantial.
And mandates. I think the schools are more subject to these than the rest of town, but Chris mentioned some of the ones we had to do as far as voting. But some of the standards that the state sets as far as education are unwavering and takes time, energy, resources to take care of them.
Let me just highlight one thing on here, fire department restructuring, and I know it did add some expense to the budget, but I think it's important because if you recall on an earlier slide, ambulance receipts. Now, ambulance receipts have almost doubled in the last 5 years, and it's substantial. It's real money, and come close, they don't quite, but come close to offsetting some of that additional cost that we had to absorb with the structuring. So that's, and hopefully that will continue. Again, by having an ambulance service, we do get the benefit of those additional funds. They're not one time, they're ongoing. I think it's important to recognize the caliber of the staff that we have to have in order to provide that service, and we can't be afraid to fund that.
Thank you.
I shouldn't be in charge.
Okay, so you heard free cash come up a lot. We have a select board policy that basically says not more than 1% of the prior year, the budget should be for ongoing expenses. And again, free cash is not free cash. It's just unexpended funds from the prior year that get allocated going forward. So if you take a look at the numbers, we've stuck to that 1%. But as a structural policy, it is not a good idea.
Good evening, everybody. Jennifer Warren Diamond. I'm the town administrator. There is some additional slides on the budget on the website, and one of those slides talks about the historical use of free cash in the operating budget before the time that there was this 1% policy. So if you look back in '05 to '09, the amount of free cash used in the operating budget was significantly higher. The highest amount was in 2007 at $755,000, the year after which a $3.1 million operational override was proposed. But over the 21 years that I went back calculating the amount of free cash used in the operating budget, it's a total of $6.78 million. So I would just want folks to think about $300,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money year over year to patch the budget. But if we aggregated that money, what could we have built? What could we have repaired? What could we have provided? It should not be used in the operating budget.
Thank you. That's a good point. The numbers really do get pretty large. And again, using this policy, we starve other budgets. So, sir?
Winthrop Handy. We share a substation, electrical substation, with the town of Boylston. I was wondering, Jim, if you could address the possibility or impossibility of special needs being also shared with Boylston and possibly Berlin. Pardon?
Yeah, if you're talking about regionalization, that's something that has not been discussed recently. So it's, it would have to be something going forward, and other towns would have to be willing to do such a thing. So that isn't something that we've discussed. And it brings upon a whole set of new challenges that would add to budgeting and whatnot.
I will mention on that general subject, the town has been and is exploring other options for regionalization of specific services. I know we've got a shared building inspector in this budget. We're looking at pet control, animal control, being a shared service. So it's facilities manager. Thank you. So, and we're looking at these things, but it's an incredibly complex, time-consuming process because every town places itself first, and who does the give. So it's a continuous agenda for the town administrator, always looking for what kind of shared services could work. Probably the biggest one we've done is the regionalization of public safety, which has saved us a huge amount of money. So it's always on our minds. It's just it's not so easy to do. Dispatch, yes. Okay, so this is where it's going to get a little more interesting. So what are our options? So either we tighten our belt or we allow for more money coming into town through an operational override. So this year, the town administrators put on our warrant two budgets, one which is within our current tax levy capacity and one that provides for an operational override. So in conjunction with the schools, the town administrators figured out how to make budget for this year work if we are going to allow ourselves to be constrained this way. But that may take care of 25. It will not take care of 26. So we're looking at major service reductions to accommodate what is likely to be something around a $1.8 million deficit. And you can take a look at what you see as an average salary. So if we're talking personnel, that's a substantial number of personnel. We could be talking about programs. So no matter how you slice it, it's going to be difficult. But if we go within override, the override that is going to be included is basically a $4 million override. And I know we heard prior to the meeting, why $4 million? Well, I think that the town administrator covered this in her budget message, which she mentioned is available on the website. But in essence, the municipal and education departments got together, took a look at what they projected to be their increase in specs over time, took a real hard look at what the revenue growth was going to look like, and the answer was $4 million over 5 years. Now, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail because that's not going to come all at once. So belt tightening. It's only so much money to go around. If we're going to try to stay within these bounds, we've already looked at deferring capital requests to next year, again, to balance the budget. There's a number of projects that we really should get started on. We will not. And for 26, we have no other choices. It's services, programs, personnel. Those are the three options. None of them are going to be pretty. So again, $4 million is what's proposed. The end result, if this goes through, your property taxes will be increased. What will it cost you? Well, it depends on the year. We don't have it included in this presentation, but the town administrator has basically said, if the override goes through, $600,000 of the $4 million in levy capacity is what she would move forward as part of the warrant article. So although we're getting approval for that $4 million, there's no intention that it's used all together right away. It'll be staged over time. Ultimately, we don't want to be coming to the town every year asking for an override. That would drive everyone crazy, and we'd have 4-hour-long town meetings, and I don't think anybody wants that. What do you get? This plan is solely for level services. We're not looking at adding anything. So this is just to continue to get what you're already getting. So what's being proposed is a $4 million override. How do we control that? Well, there's really only 3 mechanisms in place. The biggest one, the most important one, is town meeting. You vote on the budget. The town administrator will prepare one in conjunction with the various town departments. It'll be put before you for a vote. I think based on sensitivity, we'll probably have a separate item that says, okay, this is how much of the levy capacity we need to add. Obviously, she's charged with the development of the budget, and the Finance Committee is charged to be an independent opinion body to take a look at those budgets and assess any changes that we might think is appropriate.
The other thing is just the town administrator charged with budget development and mediation of budgets with the schools, correct? Because the schools prepare their budget, and that's a part of that. So I think that both, a symbiotic relationship is critical, and it's been great thus far.
So what happens next? So town meeting is coming up, and on the budget, on the warrant are 2 separate budgets proposed.
Close. Can I just clarify this?
Please.
So I just want to clarify, because what we're doing for FY '25, or what we're proposing for FY '25 is very simple, it's really going to be 2 motions under 1 article, okay? So the changes, so we have our base budget, our balanced budget for the town and the school. That's the budget that creates the $1.3 million structural deficit. That's what we're going to call the base budget. If the override is approved, $300,000 would be added to the bottom line for the school budget, so their budget would increase by $300,000. The municipal town side of the budget would have no changes to the bottom line, but that free cash that's used to balance the budget would not be used to balance the budget. So that's the $600,000, okay?
Thank you. I didn't realize that had been condensed into 1 article. Thank you. So if the override passes at town meeting, it'll be voted on in the June town election. And we've been through some debt exclusion overrides, so you've probably seen this in the past. So we need basically a simple majority on both of these at town meeting and in the ballot for this to go through. If the override doesn't pass this year, it'll be necessary to put it on the agenda for next year for all the reasons that we've talked about. And we don't live in a vacuum, so there are other things that we aren't doing, and just want to make sure everyone is aware. We've been pushing back capital purchases just based on budget limitations. We have some really large projects that are pending. The schools are in serious need of some building upgrades. DPW and fire department are living in antiquated facilities right now. That needs to be addressed. We had an ADA compliance review done, so there's a list of ADA compliance issues that the town has to deal with. We don't have specific timelines on any of these. They've been pushed back. They need a lot more attention before there would be anything to bring to town meeting. And one thing I would note, understand that the purpose of tonight is just to review the facts. We're not suggesting any specific course of action. We're not asking you to do anything at this point other than hopefully ask any questions that you have so that you can be as informed as possible when we get to town meeting. And the line here, Proposition 2.5 Override Questions and Answers, is actually a link for citizens to click on that will give you access to the town administrator's budget report.
I'm Sandy Meinersma, 20 Maple Street. You guys did a really great job. Thank you very much for being so thorough and informative. That being said, I do have 2 questions. One, if we approve this $4 million override and we're going to do $600,000 in '25, you must have some projection for 26, 27, 28, and 29. And if you're saying 5 years, what does that look like? That's my first question. Like, how much are we going to increase it in
Who
26?
wants to take that? Well, I can't give you a year to year. I mean, I think that depends on the budgets that get formulated year in and year out. There were estimates that were prepared that were kind of, again, I wasn't part of the preparation. I don't know if I think we can safely say it will be more than the 600,000 in 2026. How much more is going to depend on the needs of the schools, the needs of the town, and if the town wants to talk to that a little closer, as well as, Cindy, additional funding sources that may or may not fall out of the sky between now and, we can only hope. I mean, it's not that we're going to stop trying, but Jen, why don't you take it?
Thank you. So the town and the school did each perform this exercise to look at what our estimates would be in those intervening years. And what we realized is two things. One, it gives a false answer to something that is unsure. So we could tell you that our estimate for FY26 is going to be X, our estimate for FY27 is going to be Y. But all we really are sure of is the bookend years. So the bookend year might not be in 5 years when we hit that 4 million. It might be in 6, it might be in 4. We're really only sure of those bookend years. A lot can happen. We have planned developments in the queue that should add to our new growth. If those don't go forward, that's going to impact us negatively. If, there's other, I'm locked in for health insurance. We talked about health insurance being one of the biggest cost drivers. We were facing a double-digit % increase in health insurance. I locked in for 2 years at 6.6% increase. What that means, though, in the third year, can I assume a 6.6%? I don't know, because what they're going to look at is what our numbers are doing for our losses. So we really can only say with assuredness what those two bookends are going to be, and in between it's just going to be based on a whole slew of factors that we can't possibly quantify down to the penny at this moment.
Okay. I guess I'm just concerned because $4 million is a lot more than we really need for next year. And I'm concerned that if you don't have those kinds of numbers, the town will be coming back in 4 years or in 3 years saying we need more money. So that's my concern with that. My other question is, one of the things that Ray just mentioned was the school building project, and I'd love it if the school department would talk about what's the timeline for building a school.
So we have been applying the last couple of years for to get approval from the state, and last year we did not quite make the cut. Where the application's already submitted, or we've submitted again for this year. I felt very good about the meetings we had last year, so hopefully it'll be promising that we get accepted into the program this year. And if we do, it's roughly, a 5 to 7 year process, maybe a little longer from the start to finish, as far as getting building designs, find a place to put it, the funding sources and everything all the way through. So it's a ways out, but we're in the process of hopefully getting pretty close to being accepted into the program. And that all depends on if the state decides to actually fund it, because the most recent years, there's another part of the program which is an accelerated repair program, and last year they decided not to fund that at all, right? So a lot of this depends on school funding, them deciding to fund the program each year.
Thanks, Jim. Additional questions? Yeah, sure.
Larry Moy, 84 Prospect Street. Stupid question, I guess. So the override and the amount that was published for, if you've got a $500,000 house, it's whatever, that's in addition to the fact that taxes would be going up every year anyway due to the 2.5%. So after 5 years, whatever our tax bill is might be 10 or 12% higher, plus the additional amount from the override, assuming they were to spend all $4 million, assuming the town were to allocate all $4 million in its budget process. And I presume, realistically, just like it works for everybody, if we're going into $600,000 for this year, that $600,000 is a base, and maybe next year it's another $700,000 or up to $4 million total. If the 4 million's not spent in the 5 years or approved by the town in the 5 years, then you said bookending at 6 years. Doesn't it stop? Is it a 5-year? No?
No. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Larry, good questions. I mean, the other thing about the levy limit is, we don't have to tax to the levy limit.
Right.
And many towns don't. We always have. I mean, that was a slide we talked about putting on here, whether we should or not. But we just thought, enough data, it can be confusing, so we don't want to do too much. But, yeah, we've always gone right to the limit, as we've had to, and then some, as we've demonstrated by the structural deficit. But Jen, did you want to talk to this?
I guess I just wanted to say that the $4 million override affects this line. Sometimes, I'm visual, so looking at things visually helps me. It affects this line. It doesn't, we need town meeting authorization for what we're actually expending. But you're correct that it compounds, and you're correct that if we go to the full 4 million, there would be 2.5% applied every year after that.
Thanks.
I'm John Lukács, 101 Angel Brook Drive. I've only been living in West Boylston for 5 years. Before that, I was in Shrewsbury, but I am somewhat familiar with their budget process and the overrides they went through. One point of clarification on what we just talked about before I ask a couple of my questions. You're going to pass an override for $4 million this year. Does that mean the taxation, people's taxes will go up in aggregate of $4 million this year? You're saying it's only going to go up to 600 this year, and then next year you'll see how much more additional it needs to go up. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because that's hasn't been the way they've done it in Shrewsbury, which is what I was familiar with. Okay. As far as the pandemic funds, I know that there were a couple of sources, and I know from news articles about other towns, they were spending the money on other esoteric things that maybe really weren't essential. So my question is, I don't know what, I don't know, I haven't looked at your budget, I wasn't paying attention, but I guess my question is, in terms of all those funds, have they all, even though they may have been assigned to some spending, have they all actually been spent, or there's still some that are unappropriate that could be reallocated if necessary?
It's like 300,000. I mean, we've done a pretty, I'm going to say, prudent job of assigning those funds to not necessarily esoteric, I mean, more reasonable, some operating funds. I mean, we've made the choice to fund some mandates going forward. Yeah, MS4, for instance, which is the stormwater management program that has, again, come down from the federal government that we have to comply with, and no money came with it. Just, by the way, you have to do this. So.
Sure. Okay, so my question about this was on state aid. I noticed it was like only 12.8%. I think if you look at many other towns, I know Shrewsbury's was close to 16% in terms of its contribution. And one of the things that, they focused on, and I was trying to help them focus on it even more, was that some of the costs that the town side of the budget incurs on behalf of the school department, are all those funds included? Because when the state figures out how much state aid you're going to get, it's based on how much the town is contributing to the school department. And if you don't show some expenses that the town is incurring on behalf of the school department, they will end up giving you a lower number. So that's something I think that needs to be a closer look needs to be taken.
I think we're meeting that benchmark, but we can certainly look into it.
I'm talking about things like public works. If you have I don't know if the maintenance department, the maintenance provided to the school department is within the school budget or within the town budget. If it's within the town budget, then some of that should be allocated.
Gotcha.
And reported. So, and then okay, it's in the school budget, so really the town doesn't provide any services to the school department at all. All the services that the school needs is self-contained within the school department. Okay. Then my other question has to do with the special education. I noticed it's 37%. Again, my recollection in Shrewsbury and looking at other numbers from other towns is that the numbers were significantly lower. So I know you said you've addressed some of that and tried to bring maybe some of the out-of-district placements in district. And okay, I think you need to do more because our number seems to be a lot. Special education as a percentage of the total education budget seems to be significantly higher than many other towns. So maybe we need to be looking even more closely at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark Trudeau, 16 Linwood Lane. Just two quick questions. One was, I'm interested to learn more about the unfunded state and federal mandates. And I was wondering if y'all would be willing to maybe put together a simple Pareto of the biggies and maybe email it out or post it on the town website or something like that. That would be of interest to me. And then the other thing was, maybe I've been living under a rock, but I'm wondering if anyone could explain broadly the structural reasons that insurance is increasing so fast in cost. What's going on there? Do we have a sense of that? And might there be anything we could try to do about it longer term as voters, for example?
Thanks. I mean, I can't speak directly to it. I mean, as Ray pointed to, we do have an insurance advisory board that looks at options on the insurance side. I know that there's some collective bargaining agreements that kind of, drive how we look at those as well. You want to take it?
I mean, just that that's really something that is on that question is really on a national level.
Yeah.
This is not something, West Boylston is not special in any regard here. So that is something that's occurring on a level far beyond the confines of this town. In particular, why we were looking at double-digit increase is that we have some pretty high losses that are Marsha Carnes is the chair of the Insurance Advisory Committee. We meet, once every 2 months or so with the group. We have some pretty high losses that are driving us. That was what was driving us to the double-digit increase. But with our threat, so to speak, that we were going to leave and find another insurer, that's how we got down to 6.6%. But 6.6% is very favorable.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add to that also. So from private industry standpoint, last year when we went to our insurance advisor, they said, it's going to be big numbers. You got to be ready for big numbers. And it came in at 6.5%. And our insurance advisor was thrilled because she was expecting something over 10, which was nearly the average of her other clients. So, as Jen said, it's a national issue. It's rising cost of healthcare and aging of America. So it's not something we have direct control.
Mainly a health insurance issue, primarily, as opposed
That's
to
what we're
other kinds
talking
of
about
risks.
specifically.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And in retirement, Mark, too. I mean, part of it is, again, that's a big piece. We have to fully fund that, and with market fluctuations and an aging population, it's happening.
Hi, I'm Chris LeBlanc, 4 Heritage Lane. I've only been in West Boylston for 3 years now, so I don't know a lot about the town. I know some, learning, but I'm kind of surprised at how I'm hearing that we don't have the ability to grow. The population, the commercial side of things. Can you give me a little education, a quick education on, you say there's a bunch of unprotected land. Well, or protected land, how do we unprotect it and use it? If we only have 2,000 single-family homes, the taxes on the residents are going to go up year after year after year. It's not just for the next 5, it's going to be for the next 50.
And it's a great question. I mean, we do have some new growth on the board. I don't think it's going to solve the problem, but it's going to address some of that, some multifamily stuff going in and so forth. But the protected land is the protected land. I mean, I don't think, unless someone can tell, we've tried to talk to DCR about swaps, land swaps, where we could possibly get some of their land for some of our less productive that, we could possibly throw into development. And they just have not been interested thus far. Will that change? I don't know. I think we probably had our best shot when we talked to them 4 years ago under a different administration, but I don't know. I'm not gonna bias any administration.
So on the commercial
Even though I
side,
think I
though, I
just
mean,
did.
the commercial lots available, I mean, basically, is
Commercial-
that all sold out too?
I don't know what the build out is. I mean, I know we had looked at it, but we're not far from it. So, Raj, you want to speak to it at all? Mostly full. I mean, unless there's, the only thing we can really hope for is maybe some adaptive reuse on some of the commercial, but that's going to take a special.
Yeah, I mean, I've
developer.
been spoiled. I lived in Marlboro and I lived in Needham. Both had huge industrial complexes.
You're very
right?
spoiled coming from.
And they
Marlboro,
had,
yeah.
different tax rates for the commercial side of
Absolutely.
things. I'd like to see the town maybe look at increasing their tax rate on the commercial side, even though it's not a big commercial business that we have. It's still lower than a lot of the other towns in the area.
It is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you could still look at doing a split tax rate,
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Oh,
So, I don't know, who am I? Oh, Christina Pedoni, One Pheasant Hill Run. So, part of what I see is we have a minimum, a lot of those towns, half of an acre, you could build a 3-family on it. Here, we don't allow it. I've been in town a little less than 20 years. I have never seen one development or even a multifamily house not go up without a standing fight. We filled this room with 3 developers that wanted to build here, and the room was overflowing with people outside and in. We want no one building. We don't want you putting anything up. And every time they have fought it. This was only just a couple months ago. There's active fights about building West Boylston Street right now. If you don't build, you don't have new growth.
Right.
So you're kind of stuck. Those areas, they don't have a minimum acreage. Here, we don't want to build, and we don't want to pay taxes, so you're kind of,
You can't have both.
yeah, well, you're stuck.
I
It's a
completely
unicorn.
understand, absolutely. Okay. Because my concern, I mean, I'm paying $7,000 a year for taxes on half an acre. I was paying $5,000 in Marlboro for 2 acres. And the only thing I can see is it's, in 5 years, it's going to be 8,000, 9,000, whatever, and it's just going to continue without the growth. So maybe the residents have to change a little bit on allowing more growth. Or it has to be mandated by the town, something. Because without the growth, I don't know how we're going to survive.
yeah, you're right. And I think, and Christina, we did look at 2 of the developers who were, favorably as far as 2 out of the 3 that are moving forward, if I'm not mistaken.
At a snail's pace.
At a snail's pace. But that will bring additional revenue. I mean, so it's not like we're totally opposed, but it's, again, getting that message out, getting it out communicating it in a manner that is.
I think that has to be part of the argument at
Right,
the town meeting.
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
There has to be growth, or we're just going to keep paying.
Yep,
So, thank you.
yeah. Thanks. John, are you coming, you're going to
Hello.
fill one of the vacancies on the FinCom? Is that-
Well, anything's possible. John Owenisi in Stillwater Heights. Two-part question. One, and thank you. I know this is an incredible amount of data to present with all the trends, so thank you for everyone that put this together. But if I heard the discussion correctly, it sounded like there actually have been 2 budgets prepared. One that assumes the passage of a 2.5 override, and another that I would describe more as an austerity budget without a 2.5. It would be enlightening to know if we didn't pass the 2.5, what does the austerity budget look like? What are the specific impacts? That will allow people to make more of an intelligent decision. And my second question is, has the Finance Committee and will the Select Board be taking any position in terms of voting to approve, just taking a position to support the 2.5 override or not? But the first question is, if in fact the override didn't pass, what do those impacts look like to the schools, to public safety? That certainly would be enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Great questions. And on the first one, and Jen, I'll try my best, but you can jump in if I'm going sideways. There's the article is a two-part article. All right, the budget is the expense side of the budget is indifferent between the two parts of the article. The funding sources are the difference. So basically, the one part of the article passes the budget with the structural deficit, all right, of $1.3 million, what we're saying. So the schools are depleting funds. The town's continuing to put in free cash, which we should not be doing, but we're doing that. If it is funded, I mean, if the second part of the article passes for the 2.5 override and then goes to the ballot box and passes there in June, then that budget will stand and we will have $600,000 in additional revenue to go towards.
The school expense side increases by.
The school, okay, the school expense side will go up 300,000, right? So there. I don't know if the school wants to speak to where that's going to go or how you.
Less of the reliance on service.
Okay.
You have to use microphone.
Rich Maher, Superintendent. If it did pass, that 300,000 additional would lessen the reliance on the circuit breaker relief we're using to balance the structural deficit.
Right. That's helpful. I was getting more at, if it didn't pass, worst case, the 2.5 override doesn't pass, what is the impact to headcount, to staffing? Is it possible to answer that?
There is no impact. For
But you would
fiscal
just
year,
be-
for fiscal year '25, there is no impact to, if the budget, if the override budget does not pass, it means that we will continue to have a $1.3 million deficit in our budget. There is no cuts, there is no programmatic services. In FY '26, that's all going to change.
Thank you.
And specifically what will be cut, well, we'll be looking at that over the late winter, December, January, and you'll be hearing about what those would be
Okay,
then.
thank you. I did have a second part to my question.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thank you. Oh, the second part. Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. You want to touch it? So we have not voted at this point to whether we will endorse or not endorse which part of that article we will. We will be looking at that and we hope to have an opinion on that for town meeting. And the select board?
We have not voted on it yet. We have a meeting this coming Wednesday, not this Wednesday, the following Wednesday, to look at these.
2 days, 2 days. It better not be, yeah. 2 days after town meeting, yeah. Great. Yes.
Richard Footner, Newton Street. I've been a town resident and taxpayer for 47 years. One slide caught my attention, which was, I think was the second one that was up, that showed the percentage of average income, one before that, the percentage of average income that went to real estate tax. That's it. And West Boylston seems to be the highest of all of the towns mentioned there. If our taxes are to go up further, I suggest strongly that you might explain the impact that it's going to have on us, where we already pay a high percentage of annual income on real estate taxes.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The column on the right,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
17.56 number.
Let me get to it, okay? So this basically is the tax bill, the average tax
Right.
bill based on the average single-family
Yep.
value. And so, we're not the lowest, there's 3 that are lower than we are, but we're certainly not
No,
the
but
highest
my,
either.
my point
Now,
is that
but
the...
excuse me.
Sorry.
Okay, just give me 1 minute, I'm getting there, okay. So, over here, what we're seeing is the income per capita of
Right.
each of these towns. And the West Boylston income per capita at 39,000 is quite a bit lower than many other towns on here, and except Clinton and Leicester. But when we look at the average tax bill, this number, as a percent of this number, you're right. West Boylston, it comes out kind of high. That's because our per capita income is a bit low.
Yeah. Our household revenues aren't high.
Household revenues, compared to other towns, yes.
Right.
Are
Okay.
somewhat
So-
lower, and the result is, yes, we have this 17.5%.
So I guess we must be pretty good at belt tightening then.
These figures are from the state. One thing we don't know about those final two columns is whose income is included there. Is it all town residents or is it homeowners? And I don't think we got the answer to that, but we suspect it's all town residents, which could, with our number of renters compared to other towns, could be impacting that.
Hi, I'm June Hubbard Ward, 15 Kings Mountain Drive, and I have a couple things to mention. I was 27 years the finance director and treasurer in the town of Northborough, and put together all those budgets that gave them that $8,917 average annual tax bill. So I just did want to comment that when you talk about development in West Boylston and you say that half of the town is owned by the state, that's an incredibly good thing. Residential development doesn't pay the bill for your schools. And all you need to do is take your school budget and divide it by, I think it's 907 students, and it comes out to about $18,000 that's being spent on each student. You don't get that much in taxes from residential development. Your goal should be commercial, industrial, that type of, those categories of your taxes does lend itself to less services, less school service. I mean, they need other services, but not. And you do have the infrastructure here. You have town water, town sewer, to attract those developments. A split rate will not attract those developments. Many of the towns that do have a split rate want to get off it, and they can't. So just those comments. But will there be an opportunity at the town meeting to amend the $4 million if people feel that they don't want to approach this override all at once? Could there be a motion from the floor? I'm sure your warrant's set, but could there be a motion from the floor? And I know it has to be approved at an election as well. So is that election town warrant set?
Yes.
Or would there be more?
The election ballot has been set, and
So there aren't any
that's enough.
options here for people if they... It's yes or no, but then you'd have to hold a special election if town meeting...
Correct.
So town meeting could amend it, and then you'd have to hold a special election with an amended amount, is basically the answer, yeah. And I did want to ask the school committee member, when you talked about the application to the state for a school project, a building project, is that the high school or the elementary, or is it everything?
The plan would be to replace the high school building with a new facility somewhere else and then move the elementary school into the current high school.
Do you have any estimate of what that, you had to have an estimate. What did the application ask for as found a cost estimate for that project?
No, there's no cost estimate in the application. It's about a need. So a need for a new building. So if selected, we would then go through a design phase to pick a building and find an, adequate space and et cetera.
You have no estimate for the cost for that, not in your capital plan, no placeholder?
I don't have an estimate. I mean, there's a lot of school buildings going around right now. They're in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I hope we're not there. We're not as big as those schools, but I don't think I could come out with, or anybody here could come out with an actual
Would you
number.
surplus the existing Major Edwards Elementary School? Is that the plan?
I'm not sure. I think my guess would be that would go back to the town, right? So the town would then be able to decide what they would like to do with that. Did you want to
Also-
add something, Rich?
Oh, sure.
If we were, if the district was open to the eligibility period from the Mass Building Authority, there's a 270-day period that all those things that you mentioned would be addressed. So it's a long period before we move to phase 2 of that.
Just comes with a high, every school building project comes with a high price tag on top of a $4 million override. It seems like a lot for this community to contemplate all at once. In addition to that, some of the calculations that I read about that went into the $4 million figure for the next 5 years were based on historic kind of increases. And it strikes me that that's a bit of a pessimistic outlook, that you don't think anything's going to get any better, or there's not going to be an opportunity to have more revenue in the future. So it occurs to me that you might be generating more free cash than usual with that kind of pessimistic outlook. And do you have a plan for that free cash? I understand you don't want to use it in your operating budget. Many, many towns do. You know, this is not unusual. This is not unique. I mean, you want to limit it, but do you have a free cash plan for how you would kind of use that free cash in the future? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to point out, free cash is generated by operations. It's generated by conservative revenue forecasting, and your revenue comes in higher than what you thought, and conservative budgeting and planning so your departments don't spend all that they were given to spend. So there is some incentive there to keep managing your free cash. I mean, this is how a conservative approach is taken. You say to your departments, don't spend everything, we'd like to generate some free cash here. You know, be careful in your budgeting and be respective so that you can, you know, come out in a positive, so the town can operate in a positive manner. You know, but anyway, do you have a free cash plan going forward for those funds?
So I would love to say, first of all, that we're telling our departments to artificially depress their budgets so that we generate free cash. You'll see at our meeting that, I don't know how many town meetings you've been to, but every town meeting we do a budget fix because we're running short. And this year, for example, the police department is running $70,000 short. So we're not leaving money on the table to generate free cash. We have a plan for funding OPEB, which is just in the short term, and that was to take some ARPA funds to run them through the budget and pay for OPEB. We don't have any mechanism to pay for OPEB after next fiscal year, so OPEB will certainly be funded with free cash. Our stabilization account is only 5% funded. That's the bare minimum recommendation from the Department of Revenue. We should be putting more funds towards stabilization. And the Capital Investment Board can say that the need for capital purchasing every year, they say no far more often than they say yes to both capital needs of the town and the school.
So you would look to free cash to fund the capital expenses?
Absolutely.
In the future?
Oh, sorry.
To fund the capital investment fund, we have a reserve
saw
that we
that.
basically, that we basically
Yeah.
utilize for our funding source, or one of the funding sources that we use for equipment. And some of our equipment has passed its historical use. We'll leave it at that.
Is ESCO an electrical savings plan that you have? Was that included in your
That's-
benefits line item?
That's ESCO is that was a, oh boy, I don't know if we want to get Pat Crowley up here to talk to. I mean,
You don't have to, but I was just
No,
wondering why it was
I mean,
included in
that
the
was an
benefits.
energy savings program that we had embarked on years ago, and it's basically paying out over, 2030 is when it
And
ends.
there's a lease payment
Yeah,
for that.
and that's when it ends. But I do believe we recognized some savings from that. And I know the schools were a big part of that, and some of the town buildings.
So one point I'd also like to mention is the Worcester Regional Retirement System will be fully funded in 2036. I served on the board for 3 years. And at that time, the towns will only have to pay the net cost, not the actuarial unfunded liability. I wish they would legislate that money that had been going to the unfunded liability would then go over to fund OPEB. It's a perfect
That's a great point.
placeholder for the funds so that you don't have to get that worried about funding OPEB. I mean, you want to make progress towards it, you want to show it on your balance sheet, you want to be making some progress, but the big nut to crack will come when you don't have to fund the retirement system anymore, and you can fund that.
That's great.
So thank you for all your information tonight.
Well, thank you for your comments. And Representative O'Day, I notice you're sitting in the back. Perhaps you can bring that message back to, all right, that's a good one. Thanks.
Winthrop Handy, I just have a legal question, probably town council could answer this, but in the past, and just to recognize it, the town meeting is the best form of democracy we have. In the past, an appointed board being the Board of Health was able to overrule a town meeting decision. I'd like to know from the town manager and town council if that's still a possibility on a property or on a tax override for a appointed board to be able to do this.
I don't really understand it, and we don't have town council present, so I don't think we can address that, Wayne, from that level. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the context.
Right.
I mean, I know the town voters can go back in future years and do an underride, correct? I mean, to vote to reduce that. That's a mechanism that the state has permitted.
Well, in this instance, the town voted not to have homeowners hook up to sewer systems until they sold their property. But the Board of Health overrode a town meeting vote, and that's an appointed board, much like yourself, correct? So you would have I believe,
I don't think we.
you would have the right to override.
We're not empowered to my knowledge, and that's above my pay grade, I can tell you, I can assure you.
But I think it's a valid question the voters
Yeah.
need to know, because the town meeting is the best form of democracy, and to deny it a vote, it's just not right.
Christina Pedoni, Chair of the Select Board. My question is, I think the question I think I hear you asking is, if the town votes for the override or votes the override down against
Exactly.
it, can an appointed
Good
board, any of our boards then say, sorry, you voted no, but we're still going to do it? The answer I have always heard is no. So we don't I don't know that circumstance, and I'm not sure I would never see that happening, because you vote on the floor and then you vote at the ballot. They couldn't step in after you did the vote and say, actually, we're just kidding.
It
on-
is a valid question, because it has happened at a town meeting in West Boylston.
Board of Health
so-
separate than financial impact to
But
folks
it's
in
still
town.
not an elected, it's an appointed board.
Yeah, it doesn't, but there's nothing I can say I've ever seen in 18 years for an override, or heard even in this town, that I see that an appointed board could override a town citizen vote. And I would hope that would never happen, but I don't know any others.
No, that's
Thank
right,
you.
Christina. And when, from my standpoint, I've been to some educational, with town finance committees from around the state and the annual meetings and so forth. That's never been an issue. I mean, it's never even been brought up, so, thanks.
Hi, Ethan Carroll, Henry Street. Just looking forward to foreseeable increases. Where is the town at with collective bargaining agreements? Are we anticipating that groups are going to be entering collective bargaining, or when do those contracts end?
Anyone want to?
Rich Mara, Superintendent. All bargaining units for the schools enter bargaining next year.
And we have new agreements starting in FY '25 for fire and police that have been negotiated, and DPW, it will be entering in their second year of their contract.
You know, those contracts, 3-year, 2-year, 3? Thank you.
Lower it. Hi, I'm Jody DePatsy Luksha, and I live at 418 Prospect Street. I am a lifelong resident of West Boylston. And so my first question is, when we voted for this senior center, we voted it as a community center. However, it is not being used that way. It is being used for voting and things like this. However, it is not being offered to other, like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, or other places, other people that could gain revenue for our town to rent it out for birthday parties or anything like that. This place closes at 3 o'clock every day. So we have this gorgeous place sitting here not being utilized. Why don't we look into that to start?
That is a fantastic question.
Thanks.
One of the goals that's on the town website and also is presented, passed down from the select board to the town administrator is more rental use. Like you see other towns like Sterling and Holden, they have a really, in the evenings or on weekends, like they have baby showers and birthday showers and to
that's what
put
I'm
that
talking
together.
Mhm.
That is part of, that is part of her goals this year, and you'll get an output of that, because either she's gonna make it or not.
Okay,
But great question.
thanks. My second question is, of course, with our school budget. I've worked for a couple school districts, bigger school districts than here. And I'm wondering why, especially like, for example, this is just one example, why we have 2 vice principals in our middle high school when we only have like, what, 400 kids or something? And then in the schools I've worked with, we've had 1 for like 1,100 kids. So why are we paying 2 salaries for people we don't need that much?
There were 2 interim assistant principals for the high school for this past year, 23, 24. It's 0.5 for each of them. They were half. One was designated with middle school and dealing with curriculum. The other one was 0.5 for the high school and dealing with special ed for the other part of the day. That was a 1-year position. This current year for 24, 25, it will be 1 assistant principal solely for the building.
Okay. Plus, the other question I had, and I know this is probably not something you can talk about, but we have a lot of teachers in our school system, and we have classes that probably could be consolidated to be a little bit bigger classroom size. So we could possibly go with less teachers. And the average salaries could be cut like that by having these the teachers with bigger class sizes. But I mean, we're talking about some teachers who teach first grade who are making $100,000 a year. Why do you have to pay someone $100,000 a year to teach a first grader? Or a second or third? Like why?
Major Edwards right now is at capacity. It is its highest enrollment in several years at about 450 students. We are trying to build other programs into the building to assist some special ed programs that was touched upon earlier. In terms of salaries, that's professional status. Those teachers are generally, if they're making $100,000 a year, have been there for longer than 3 years and are granted professional status. So that would lead into a reduction in force, which is defined by the collective bargaining agreement that impacts only professional status teachers. The middle high school, the high school particularly, changed their schedule to away from the block schedule into a rotating schedule this past year. So that remains a work in progress in terms of the impact. When we did switch away from the block into the new schedule, we had concerns whether that we were going to have to expand staff or contract staff. It's been somewhat level. So that's something we can explore through the years with our enrollment. But again, our staffing is really set by professional status, and then we have our non-professional status teachers, who are those teachers who are new to the field, who've been there less than 3 years, or teachers who've come from another district, who've moved for whatever reason, and then they have 3 years to achieve professional status. With that, we do review it every year through the course of numerous administrative meetings about our non-professional status teachers and whether we're going to continue with them or we're going to non-renew for no cost. That's an annual exercise that we do.
Okay. And one more question, and not for you, Mr.
Okay.
Marha, sorry. But I just want to know, at the upcoming town meeting with votes, how do you plan on counting the votes? Because when we were here for this, we had older people counting the hands and all different counts, and so it wasn't a true vote. So how are you going to make it so it's a equitable vote for everyone, where people aren't counting raised hands? How are you going to do that?
That's the moderator, I mean, I guess, yeah, it's all, Pat's gonna grab it.
The way the votes work at town meeting, the moderator has the ability to call a voice vote. If the moderator says, no, I can't make the decision on a voice vote, we're gonna go to hands, there's not just one person counting those hands. You have two independent people that count each section. Those two people then come together and say, I got 82, we're good. I got 80, I got 82, they both count again. So it is a fair vote because two people are doing this count by section to make sure that it matches. So we're not relying on just one person. So that's the way it's been done, and they make sure that the votes from each section match.
No, I think there needs to be something better than that.
I think it's,
Sorry,
That's up to the
Yeah.
the town moderator, who is not here, is an elected official, and it's his call on, okay, voice, okay, we're gonna do hands, and then or he could say a secret ballot, and a person at town meeting can request the secret ballot as well.
Got you. No, I understand, but I was at this meeting, and I can assure you, and I can tell you, that there were several people that did not know, and one would go, oh yeah, 80, 87, the other would be like, oh yeah, okay. It was just, you could tell, it was just not done right. So that's all I'm saying. I just want to know how this is going to be counted in a fair way, and that everyone's vote is counted.
So, yeah, my understanding, is similar to Pat's, is whether it's the moderator or the clerk, assigns or empowers counters. Yeah. And there's more than two, because I think they're double counted. I think each area is double counted
I understand.
by the counters.
I understand that, but that was just my
Yeah,
question.
it's an observation, but it's been fairly good. And if there's a discrepancy, they go back out and count again. Again, because I've been at town meetings where, all right, we have to do this again.
Yep.
Because there
Yeah,
was an
that one
inconsistency.
was where you had to do it again, and then it
Okay.
was still kind of not, I don't know, it was just,
Yeah.
a lot of the people who were volunteered to count wanted this place, where
Oh, you're
other
talking about
people
for the
did
senior
not.
center? You're
Yes,
talking about a
yes, sir.
specific vote?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And you know what? I'm going to be there too, and I think it's beautiful, and that's why I'm asking to rent it out and make money for the town. And the last piece is, for the employee insurances, what is how much do the employees have to pay for their portions? Because, as everyone knows, in industry, that has changed significantly in the years. And I know it used to be like 90-10 here. How is it now?
Not even close. I don't
Anybody know?
know what the spread is. It's gone down, though, considerably.
For the vast majority of employees, it's 70-30.
Okay.
There are some that are grandfathered in at 80-20, but the vast majority of those employed still are 70-30.
There are some that pay 60-40.
Oh.
There are some that pay 60-40.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great questions, thanks. Step right up.
Resident. I just had a question regarding the last override that was successful. I believe it was in 1991. for
92,
curbside-
yeah, and then
Curbside trash pickup?
Correct, yep.
Okay, it was for $200,000, I believe, when that was originally passed.
Correct.
Could you give me an idea of how much that has grown to over those years? Just so I have something to compare what's
Yeah,
going to happen
I've
to
got
4
it
million?
in my computer, but I don't have this. I think Jen might have it. Jen, you want to take that? It's still not enough. I wish it was enough, but it's still.
So those override dollars today are $430,000.
Okay, so it just gives me an idea as to what this $4 million is going to turn into eventually, because it is the gift that keeps on giving and growing as time goes on.
Absolutely. And
Now, the other thing, I believe, one of the things on the chopping block, if this doesn't pass, will be curbside pickup may go, and we'll be responsible as homeowners, as many other towns, to pay for our own trash pickup. If that happens, that money was voted on by the taxpayers at town meeting. for specifically that purpose. Now, what happens to that money? Does that 400 and whatever $1,000 go back to the taxpayers? Or does that just become part of the general budget, even though it was voted on specifically for trash pickup?
My understanding is it continues to be part of the tax levy unless there is a.
So we could go for a tax underride?
An override,
Yep.
unlike a debt exclusion,
Mhm.
is only limited in purpose for the first year.
Okay.
And I think that that has been kind of a misunderstanding that a lot of folks had about that 90s override. So for the first year, it was for that purpose. After that first year is over, it's any general purpose.
Okay, so the taxpayers could then vote for an underride to get that money back? Could that happen? Is there such an animal? I don't know.
That could happen. We would probably, though, be facing an override at the same time because we'd still be short.
Okay, all righty. But it is open to an individual to do something like that through the proper channels. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Great. Any other questions? Anyone from the panel care to add this magnificent finance committee? Care to add anything in closing? All right. Bring that.
Everybody to give a big round of applause for ping pong.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out tonight. And we'll see you all next Monday at town meeting. All right.